I know it's been a while since I've done a video, and I'm sorry. I had my son visiting last week for the whole week, and then I've had some technical issues with the camera I'm trying to use to record. But anyway, yeah, I want to continue on because I'm pretty much wrapping this up. I was in a dark place after bonding out of that jail, but somehow that spirit continued to work in me and continued to give me visions of my healing gift. And I could see that he had already worked through my physical being for those that were around me. I mean, it had to be, a Christ spirit, because I felt hopeless and unworthy and too alone to put any effort toward my healing. The depression was so dark. I was at my dad's and I felt like I had no way out. I couldn't drive. I wasn't anywhere near friends, and I was very isolated, and I had all this anxiety. I was scared to go to sleep. I was scared to leave the house because what if we got pulled over and I got arrested again? And for any of you that's been through this, I'm sure you can relate. My thoughts, like so many women living under the effects of trauma, just overtook my mind daily. And, and I just wondered, like, how can I be a healer? Like, how can I do work that I'm called to do with everything that I've been through? And, now I was standing before a legal system with numerous felony charges. So I started trying to see a counselor on Zoom. It was an old counselor of mine. And, my dad didn't agree with that. So I got to literally have 2 visits, and that was it. I was not able to process the trauma that I had just come out of, which sucks. The counselor pointed out was that when I talked about all my pain, that I was internalizing, and he could see the depression. But when I focused outward on ways that I could be a service of others, then I would light up. And so that's one of the lessons here, is we can dwell on the things that happen to us. And I'm not saying not deal with it. I'm just saying if you're constantly dwelling on them and you're not making steps toward healing through it, then you're going to cause yourself a lot more depression. If you can talk in ways that, okay, I can take this experience and I can let God show me like what he wants to do with what I've been through to be a service of others, then you become more of a light. You vibrate higher. So for over 10 years, I had been in numerous counseling offices sharing all my pain without ever really knowing if I had been heard. And so the whole journey within ourselves is to feel heard, to feel understood, to feel that our feelings have been validated. And one of the things that I want to talk about that I'm going to kind of start doing after this, and then I'm going to repeat it again before I end the YouTube platform about my story, is I'm going to create a podcast, and it can be anonymous for people to share their stories, similar things that they've been afraid to talk about. And I will initiate some of the more like horrific things that I've kind of been through and overcome. And then I just hope that creates a safe space for people to share. Because when you start talking about these things, it's hard and it feels like it gets worse before it gets better. And I mean, it does, because you're bringing all this stuff up to surface. But I can tell you, since I started doing this in October, my life has changed drastically. I am attracting wonderful opportunities. I'm in such a good place. And I want that, like I want that for people who's been through similar. So anyway, so after being released from jail in 2020, I didn't realize, what kind of jail I was going back into. I'd never lived with my dad before. And that was the only place I really had to go. And you had to have an address in order to get a bond, Anyway, so after I lived with him for a while, I could just tell that my dad was full of his own hurt. A lifetime full of hurt that he had never dealt with. And he didn't ever know how to deal with it. And so he was a dad that had lost a son to suicide. And this helped me realize that as a child growing up around all this hurt, I never felt like I was good enough. Like I never felt like anything I did was ever going to be good enough. And I was trying to do things in order to earn that love. And it was not me that was not good enough. It's not you that's not good enough. We're all good enough. And we're all deserving of great things. I was not a defective person. I was a kid that deserved to be loved and to be loved for me, not what I was doing or how I could perform. So there are generations after generations that never deal with their pain. And then it continues to be passed down and passed down. Anyway, until a shaman or a sage or a saint or sorcerer or whatever you want to call someone with the awareness of their light working abilities, when they decide to break these cycles and these curses, then you can stop. And, I knew that after I had my son, I passed along the pain that I had grown up and endured. And when I saw what my pain had contributed to him, I wanted something different. And, I hope it's not too late. But we also have to give ourselves grace. Because I believe a lot of us do what and how. The only way that we know how. I'm getting choked up. I'm sure my words are not making sense, but give yourself grace. And give your next generation a chance. And we make choices that are irrational. And that is because of what trauma does to the brain. I mean, if you went through a lot of abuse, if you went through sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse as a child, there's a part of your brain, when you go into survival mode, it makes irrational choices and decisions. And that's how people end up in jail with stupid charges, and when they calm down, they're like, I can't believe I did this. Or they have somebody say, well, that's not like them, because it's not you. It's that part of your brain that takes over. And I've learned a lot about this in my own counseling. So when somebody's made you feel like a bad person, or you're even feeling like you're a bad person for what you've done, you're not. You were responding out of survival. And depending on how much you had to go through and how much survival, you grew up in as a child, it's going to depend. And I'm not saying some choices are right. I mean, we don't need people going out just killing people for no reason. But, smashing something with a ball bat, or putting your fist to the wall, or screaming at somebody who's cut you off in traffic. I mean, there's just things that, it's not really us. It's not who we are at the core, but we can work on those, and we can work those things out, and we can make a better generation for those who go before us. Anyway, in the midst of feeling like I had left rules and regulations of a jail, I was under rules and regulations where I was. And I mean, I'd really gotten tired, but I was trying to tap into some of my spiritual practices and learn something, because you need something to get you through these things. And I was spending as much time as I could with the trees, with the earth, and I was taking time in nature. And I would stand in my dad's driveway day after day and just cry and pace. And about 8 months later, I really started praying for God to open up a door. I knew I needed my own place. And so I found this apartment in the town that I grew up in. And I went and I filled out an application. And then I went and I laid hands on this building with a friend. And I prayed. Because I'm like, Jesus has told us that where two or more are gathered in our Father's name, our prayers are answered. And so I needed an answered prayer. I needed my own place. And I didn't realize this until later. It's a pretty big building, but in the place where we had laid hands and prayed, that was the exact apartment that I got. It was right under that window. Anyway, I needed a place, and I needed it fast. I was losing my soul. And I knew that with some of my shamanic practices and some of the things that I were doing that was really connecting me deep with Christ's Spirit, was calling me into something better. And so, everything from what this ex-girlfriend had falsely accused me of, to being detained at the Mexican border and thrown into jail for 3 weeks, drug across the country for 8 days through 28 states or 27 states, and then to arrive back in this county where the warrant was taken out and be in isolation for another week in medical. It was all kind of part of the plan for me to come back into my divine purpose as a healer. And so I woke up, I've been so damn fixated on trying to date, trying to find a relationship, trying to find love and companionship. And I mean, that's really what we all want at the core of us, but it was my calling to teach people about Jesus' stories and discipleship and living in community with each other, so we could share a meal and offer a drink and administer healing, with our hands for those who were sick. And so Christ put me where that was, and it was at this Greystone community. And I had the best apartment in the building. It was on a hall all to itself. No neighbors. And this was kind of like my mountaintop. I could go and get away from some of that noise and then go back out and feel like I could do what I was called to do. And so I had a safe space to practice my spiritual practices. But I still continued to run. Even when I, moved into this building in January of 2021, I was still trying to, dip into dating apps and stuff. And I don't want to ramble here. This is kind of the finishing touch. I hope that the people who are following me right now on this YouTube channel, and I appreciate you watching my videos, really, I want to take, it's all about being in the whale's belly, and that's what happened in Mexico. I was swallowed up by the whale because I was trying to run. I stayed in that whale's belly for weeks, and then I was spit out in this county, in this town where I was supposed to be, that I had been running from. And there were things that I needed to settle up and I needed to heal from there. And there was still training I needed. And that's why this is like the Jonah story. That's why this is called Entering the Whale's Belly. Yeah, hell's belly. It did feel like hell. Entering the whale's belly at the border because I was swallowed up by the whale at the border and spit out in Georgia. And I had a lot of transformation. And I would like to continue talking about my spiritual journey and what happened during those 4 years that my life was on hold. Because it hasn't been that long since I was kind of freed up. And I just, I'd like to share with you what all happened. And maybe I should kind of do one more video and cram those 4 years into 10 or 15 minutes. I mean, I could. So I'm going to sum this up. While attempting to read through this manuscript after I finished writing my story, all the connections became clear to me. My soul called in all the behaviors to create the experiences. I know that's hard to grasp, but the experiences were my initiation into what I've been called to practice. And hopefully for people who have been incarcerated. It's like the behavior led me into relationships with a woman that would be a mastermind of trying to take me down. My brother knew it was time for him to leave this earth, to prepare and support me as a healer. His death motivated me to travel to Italy, where during a women's retreat, I've become very vulnerable about my stories. And it was those women that gave me the strength to come back home and leave that abusive relationship. And which caused her to call my grandmother and told her I'd stolen from her. And then that warrant that was placed on me while I was in Mexico on another writing retreat, helping to facilitate women's healing. And then it was that hawk that I saw on that island in the Sea of Cortez that kept telling me the spirit of the shaman awaits you, which is the spirit of Christ. And that's what I recognized later. The arrest of that border pulled me into a 3-week incarceration at a women's detention center in San Diego, California. The more I was in isolation, the more connected with spirit during reading and writing and reminding myself of Jesus' stories. That's what happened to me in isolation. Even the women, noticed in there, and that one of them would call me Mary Magna Brittany, and tell me that they could see I was a light. And yes, it was me holding that light, but it wasn't me. It was what I was having to do in there to connect with something brighter and lighter than me. I know that I can now use my story to be a voice for the voiceless, and help them find their voices. And I know that, like I said in the beginning of this, that underneath the behavior is just hurt and pain. And I've healed in a lot of ways. And those 4 years in waiting were not easy. I met a beautiful woman about 2 years into the 4, who was here in Ohio, and she would travel once a month down to Georgia to see me. I paid $10,000 to an attorney to take my case and hopefully get things straightened out with me and my family. But you're always sitting in the unknowing. I made new friends. I lost friends. I I don't have enough time here to thank everybody. But the closer that it got for me to get this thing in action, I felt called to do a 40-day sadhana. And if you remember, if you're religious at all, or if you're spiritual and you've read, Jesus' Gospels, there's even 40 days for Lent. There's 40 days is very significant in your spiritual journey. So I took 40 days and I was up between 3:30 and 5:30 every single morning. Around that 40th day, I was called into court. And it was me, my mom, my sister, my best friend, Connie. And we sat in the courtroom, and when the judge called my name, it got very messy. They were missing evidence, and because there was lack of evidence, and he suggested it be thrown out. He wasn't my judge. He was a fill-in judge. The DA, the assistant DA, thumbed through my stuff. She didn't even know what was going on. The evidence was such a mess. When I read the evidence, it was words like possibly, unsure of. And, I got the call 2 days later from my attorney, said it was done. It was finished. It was thrown out. And I could guess, I had to wait for the weekend. But on day 40, that morning, I did my last Kundalini yoga practice. And 2 hours later, I got the call from my attorney that said, it's all done. You can go see your grandmother. You can get your passport back. You can move. You can go on with your life. And I want so bad to share that video of me reunited with my grandmother. I don't know about putting that public, but I'll think about it. I mean, for the people who know me, they've seen it. And again, I appreciate you listening. Just always know that God's got a plan, and if you stay faithful and you keep running the race. I mean, there were times I wanted to kill myself, especially there at the end. I had gotten to where I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't even hardly get up. But I had friends and I had people keeping me busy, and I had tried to have a focus. But, one of the things that a good friend told me, she said, you find one thing that's worth living for. And that was my son. And I knew that he would be crushed if I'd done something myself. And so I made that my focal point, and I kept pushing through, and I made it. So if you're having a hard time, you find that one thing that's worth living for, because there's something and that you trust. And I've been given back everything that was taken away from me, plus some. And that's the punishment for somebody who tried to destroy my life and destroy my family. God's blessed me with a home and money and a business and everything that I've needed. So just, hang in there. And thanks for everybody who's took these last 4 months and went through this story with me. I wish I could see your faces. I wish I could know you. And just, I'll make another video when the podcast is up. And the next thing happens. All right. Peace and love. I love all of you. Even if I've never seen your face, I love you, and you've got a story. And it's okay. You find somebody safe, you talk about your story, and you heal. And you open yourself up to everything God has for you, because it's something. You weren't put here by mistake.